It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, the hometown commander, and we are back for another episode of Millzy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. If you follow the channel, you know that I've been kind of silent for the last week and a half. I just posted an update video. I'd love for you guys to watch that, find out what's going on in my life. But we are back for our last week of Lord of the Rings content before we start Commander Masters. There's a poll up on the channel. If you want to vote for what order you want to see the precons in and what order I update them in, I'd love to get your opinion over on that poll. But let's get into it today. Today we're looking at Saruman the White Hand. This is our secondary commander to the Sauron, or Saruman is the secondary commander in the Sauron precon, and I think I like Saruman a lot better as the commander for that deck. Now, we talked about this Amass kind of style deck already in Sauron, the Dark Lord, already on the channel, and this Saruman deck is going to look kind of similar. I think it plays into some of the same ideas. The difference is that Saruman has a couple different abilities. So the first is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, we amass Orcs X, where X is that spell's mana value. Okay, so instead of Sauron, right, where it amassed us 1 every time our opponent casts a spell, Saruman says, okay, anytime you cast a non-creature spell, you amass X. This is something we can take advantage of because, of course, we can play spell singing decks where we can take advantage of us casting spells. But the cool part is the second ability says goblins and orcs you control have ward too. Well, okay, we just talked about amassing orcs, but now it's saying goblins. And there's plenty of things we can do that make goblins. But what I kind of liked about this ability was this means that we can kind of take the idea we had moving with Sauron and add some goblins to it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add just a little bit of a goblin sub-theme, but we're going to keep the orcs as well. So that's the goal. Amass, but also add some gobos. So that's the plan. Mana base, I try my best to keep this mana base as cheap as possible or down on the possible. We're not playing the fetches, we're not playing the shocks. But I think with all of the basics, we could use things like Sunken Hollow to good effect. We got Barad-dûr. Of course, we care about amassing, so Barad-dûr feels really good. Playing some cards from the precon, adding stuff like Reflecting Pool, Mount Doom, things like that. I like it. I think the mana base feels good. I think it'll do a good job for us. Getting up into the enchantments, and this is where we're going to try to have some fun. I took a lot of what we were trying to do in Sauron. There's a couple things I added. I added one of my favorite pairs of enchantments in Arcane Bombardment and Thousand Year Storm. Both of these are great enchantments on their own. Thousand Year Storm will copy the spells you cast for each spell you cast before it. Arcane Bombardment, anytime you cast your first instant or sorcery per turn, will exile a random one out of your graveyard, and then you get to copy every spell underneath Arcane Bombardment and then cast all of them. What Arcane Bombardment basically does in a spell singing deck is you get to cast a bunch of spells at once, use all of your cast triggers, and deal damage to our opponents. What this is good with Saruman is we're casting all of these and we're not paying the mana cost, so we're still going to get the amass trigger for each of them. But the cool part is because amass is a trigger that goes on the stack, we can use other effects to sacrifice that orc for something and then keep amassing and getting a new one if we want to. So we can kind of play around with the stack a little bit. So two of my favorite spell slinging enchantments, and we get to add them in here because we're trying to play our own spells. We get a little bit more benefit of our own spells, whereas with Sauron, we care more about our opponents doing things. All we won was in Sauron, but I think it feels great here. Anytime we put a counter on a permanent or player, it deals that much damage to target opponent, creature and opponent controls, or planeswalker. So anytime we put our counters on our orcs, we can deal out damage. This is going to be great with anything we're doing to amass or either of these guys, because we can just add counters and deal damage to our opponents. Book of Marzabul just seems interesting, amass a couple times, and then that third one gives all of our creatures +1/+1 menace. I like that last ability in this deck because we're going to be going wide with tokens, either our orcs, or we put enough of a sub-theme in this deck to make goblin tokens or zombie tokens with other cards. So what this is going to do is give our big board hopefully menace and have us hit through for more damage. Dreadhorde Invasion, at the beginning of our upkeep, we lose a life and amass zombies 1. Of course, the printing on the card says amass 1, but of course it's been eroded to zombies 1. And then whenever a zombie token you control, power 6 or greater attacks, gets lifelink. This can help us once our army token gets big enough Now it has lifelink, and so it can gain some life back. Firing Inscription seems really cool when it comes in. The ring tempts us, but it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So here's one of these Gutter Snipe type effects. We'll talk about Gutter Snipe when we get up to the creatures. But here we go. We get it on an enchantment, and this is great because we still get the Amass trigger from Saruman if he's out when we play this. Goblin Bombardment, sack a creature, deal 1 damage to any target. This is a really good piece in conjunction with either just making a ton of tokens or when we're sacrificing our orcs before our mass triggers go off to kind of deal damage to our opponents, or it deals damage to any targets. We could take out pesky creatures, we could get rid of planeswalkers. There's a bunch of things we can do with Goblin Bombardment, but really what we're trying to do with it is take advantage of our orc triggers and use that for good damage. March from the Black Gate, whenever it enters the battlefield or whenever an army you control attacks, we amass orcs 1. So it just gets a little bit bigger every time an army we control attacks. Rising of the Day, giving all of our creatures haste and our legendary creatures +1. So this is mainly here so that any tokens we make other than that army token get haste and can attack the turn they come down. As far as artifacts go, we're having some fun with this one. We have Arcane Signet, Chromatic Lantern, Relic of Sauron, one of the cards in the precon, Soaring, and our 3 talismans as our main mana sources. I'd really thought about putting the One Ring in here, and I just realized now it really pairs with that Mount Doom that's in our land pile, but we do have a couple other legendary artifacts we can do for it. Other than that, we're playing Phyrexian Altar again. Here's another way for us to take all those orc triggers and turn them into extra mana so that we can use that mana continually on our turn. Reaver Cleaver, we put this on our creature. It gets +1/+1 and trample. This seems like a great thing to put on something like our army token, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we create that many treasure tokens. This can just, again, give us more mana, make bigger spells. And then Wand of Orcus, whenever the equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies you control gain Death Touch on a turn. So if our army isn't already a zombie, then of course it's going to get Death Touch. This is whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, make that many 2/2 zombie creature tokens. So here's a way for us to take our army, hit somebody with it, and get a bunch of tokens in the process. So things like this is going to help us get more tokens again. We have a bunch of spells that are going to make goblins. We'll talk about those in a second, other ways to make goblins. But this is going to help us make some tokens as well. And the good thing about the zombie tokens in this is we're playing a couple creatures when we get up to the creatures that say zombie tokens you control do have X. It's meant to be for that army token, right? When you amass zombies 1 or whatever. But the cool part is if we can make zombie tokens other ways, well, now we have other zombies that have those abilities. So you could see that, Saruman may say goblins and orcs, but we really care about zombies too. So we're kind of having a little mishmash here of different creature types. Getting up into the spells, Bedevil, Deadly Rollick just saw its reprint here in Commander Master, so hopefully this comes down a little bit on the price. Reality Shift and Rapid Hybridization. These are some of our removal spells. And then we're playing Big Score and Unexpected Windfall for some draw, and they both give us treasures as well for a little bit more mana. Storm King's Thunder is a fun card that can make us copy our next spell we cast X times. This can be put in conjunction with a lot of things, but my favorite spell to put this in conjunction with is Tasha's Hideous Laughter. The higher you go into Storm King's Thunder or Fountain Storm into Tasha's Hideous Laughter, the better chance you have of just milling your opponents out. It says each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. Okay, so if you're playing against big creature decks, they're not going to get hit very hard by Tasha's. But the best part is if you're playing a lot of other decks that playing a lot of spells and things like that, you have a pretty high chance of hitting 20, hopefully in more cards. Remember, all lands are 0, so that factors in. And remember, any X spell is just going to be the cost of all the mana symbols that aren't X. But hopefully, if you can hit enough Tashas, you're going to help in the game for your opponents. And then Lazotep Plating gives us and permanents we control hexproof until end of turn, and it amasses us in the process. This is another kind of great protection spell. The only downside is it doesn't give indestructible, it just gives hexproof. But hey, that can be pretty important depending on what we're facing up against. When we get into the spells and we see a good mix of fun things, Assault on Osgiliath is probably one of my favorite cards for a deck like this. This is also a card that I've had a lot of fun playing in my Ovika list, which is another deck that I have that cares about making tokens when you cast spells. But this is Amass Orcs X. Then Goblins and Orcs you control gain Double Strike and Haste until end of turn. So in a deck like Ovika, which we're also playing, we would get a bunch of extra mana on top of this, but I like this. So with Saruman, we're actually going to amass X, and then we're going to amass X plus 3, because Assault on Osgiliath has 3 extra mana symbols, and then it would give all of them double strike, and all of our goblins and orcs double strike and haste until end of turn. We can pair this up with, again, once we get up into creatures, we have some more creatures that deal with goblin tokens or goblins. We can pair this with that and give all of our goblins double strike and haste, and that's going to help as well. Expressive Iteration for some draw, and a way to look at the top, get some fun things. I love Express Iteration, and the more times you play it, the only downside is, right, you can only play 1 land per turn, but if we use something like Thousand Year Door in our Arcane Environment to play Express Iteration, hopefully we're just getting ourselves spells that we can cast. Feed the Swarm for a little bit of removal, hits a creature or hits an enchantment. Fray of Orcs seems kind of interesting. Amass Orcs too. When you do it, deals X damage to our creature, where X is that amassed army's power. I think this is another great card off of Thousand Year Storm or Arcane Environment, because we can just start dealing out damage to creatures. Now, it has to be a creature, but hey, I think it's still worth it. Hurling Outburst just gives us 3 Gobos for 3 mana. With Saruman out, this is 3 Goblin tokens and amass 3. I think that's pretty great. I think it's good for the mana, and again, if we hit this off of our Thousand Year Storm or off of our Arcane Environment, we're just getting more Goblins. A Demonic Deluge, a big blue spell. This is very popular in blue. Spell Singing Dex, 9 mana. You pick an instant sorcery from your graveyard, copy that card, and you exile it, copy it 3 times, and you cast the copies without paying their mana cost. So this is great because 1, we're casting them, so we get all of our triggers off of Thousand Year Storm. 2, we get all of our Saruman triggers because we're casting them, and then anything else in our deck that says whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, we get those abilities as well. So Demonic Deluge is great for that reason. Because we're actually getting a bunch of value off of that one thing. Preordained for some draw. Ringside allows us to search our deck. What I like about Ringside is it tempts us right away, so we're always going to have a legendary creature when we cast Ringside. And then we just can get any card that matches a color of one of our that legendary creature we control, and more often than not, we're going to find plenty of cards we can get. No, this can't go get us an artifact, but it's going to get us anything else we need. Tempt with Vengeance, going to make us a bunch of tokens. Our opponents can take tokens, but if they do, we get more tokens. So that's pretty great. Treason of Isengard, put an instant sorcery from our graveyard back on top, and then amass 2. This is great because we can kind of recycle our spells if we have lots of ways to draw or do that. And then a Widespread Brutality, a fun little board wipe. Amass 2, and then the army you amass deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature. The downside is we could potentially hit our own creatures in the crossfire, but hopefully our army is big enough that we can knock all of our opponent's creatures out. Getting up into the creatures, this is where my hope is that we can connect all this spell singing stuff into some fun creatures. The creatures in the deck are kind of split up between things that make us tokens, things that pay off, of course, us making us tokens, or things that give us abilities when things die. So, and Hello the Painter is a creature that says the first instant sorcery spell you cast each turn has casualty 2, meaning we can sacrifice a creature with at least 2 power, and then we can copy that spell. This is great for, I think, almost every spell in our deck, but this is going to be great depending on how many army, how big our army is, or if we're amassing our army every time. We can, if we have an army that's big enough or that kind of thing, we can always have casualty live, and then we can, take advantage of the spells that we're casting. Dreadhorde Twins, when it comes in, we amass zombies 2, and then zombie tokens you control have trample. Eternal Skylord, when it comes in, we amass zombies 2, zombie tokens you control have flying. So the great part about these guys is we're taking that amass pile we already have, that army we already have, and we're giving them extra abilities. And then, when we use something like Ghoul-Caller Gisa, it says tap, pay a black, sacrifice another creature, put X 2/2 zombie creatures onto the battlefield where X is that creature's power. Now we can take that amass stack and turn it into a bunch of zombie tokens. And this is great because then we can still take advantage of these abilities, but now we have a bunch of them. So you can see this is one of those cards that's going to help us kind of move our big amass stack into a wide stack. And we could do this every turn, which is great. We could tap every turn and do it that way. Goblin Realm Master, other goblins have to attack each turn of Able. Beginning of our combat, we make a 1/1 Gobbo. Where it attacks, gets +1/+0 for each other goblin. That's attacking. This and Legion War Boss play a very similar role, and they're going to give us a goblin every turn, and hopefully we can take advantage of that goblin through other abilities. Gutter Snipe is a goblin, but it also says whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, we deal 2 damage to each opponent. So this is great because it's going to get the abilities of Any other effects that give it zombies, primarily Saruman's going to protect it, giving it Ward 2, but then we're going to deal out some damage. We have a pair of Krenkos, Krenko Mob Boss, of course, tap it, and we're going to make X 1/1 red goblin tokens, where X is the number of goblins we already control. This is great because it's going to help us get more goblins. And then Krenko 10 Street Kingpin is going to, whenever it attacks, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and then we make that many goblins. So here we go. We're making more and more goblins. Hopefully this is going to help us kind of amassing an army, pun intended, the army token we have. Lord of Nazgul seems like a really fun card in a deck like this. Whenever we cast an instant sorcery spell, we make a Wraith token, and then if we control 9 or more Wraith tokens, or 9 or more Wraiths, all of our Wraiths become 9/9s, even Lord of Nazgul. This seems great. This is another payoff for us casting spells, and we are playing 9 Nazgul as well. They just seem really fun. When it comes in, the ring tempts us. Whenever the ring tempts us, we put a +1/+1 counter on each other Wraith we control, and then they have Death Touch. So they're going to be fun. This is a little sub-theme, I think, in the deck that works really well. Mirkwood Bats, probably one of the more exciting cards for aristocrat players out there. It says whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life. This is really important in a deck like this, because if we have that Phyrexian Altar or that Goblet Bombardment out with Mirkwood Bats, what we can do is every time we cast a spell, we can use that. This trigger and that Goblin Bombardment trigger, that Phyrexian Altar trigger, to make our opponents lose a life when an orc army gets made, and make them lose a life when we sacrifice it to one of those effects. So I like Mirkwood Bats because it's going to play double duty for us. Orcish Bowmasters is just going to hurt our opponents when they draw on a Mass Orcs 1. Of course, this is the big boy card from Lord of the Rings, right? This is the card that everyone wants. Is it necessary to the deck? No. I think we can cut Orcish Bowmasters, add another spell, and I don't think the deck will be any less efficient, but I mean, if you have one, throw it in the deck. I think it works really well. Orcish Siege Master seems like a ton of fun. Other orcs and goblins you control have trample. Well, here we go. Here's another fun payoff for us having a bunch of gobos. And whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+O, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So it's going to get big, hopefully, but it's going to give everything else, all of those armies and all of those goblins, trample. If you like the idea of this goblins sub-theme, I would suggest you put in, Coat of Arms, Shared Animosity. You can put in things like that in this enchantment artifact slot to lean in a little bit more to the tokens. It's hard on your first shot at a deck to know where exactly you're going to fall on it. Am I always going to have a plethora of goblins to attack with? Am I not? If the answer is yes, if you play the deck and you realize you always have goblins ready, bango. Put the Shared Animosity in, put the Coat of Arms in, and start attacking. But I just wasn't sure, and that's where the benefit of this being a series where I put my version 1.0 of a deck list out there is these are the lessons we need to learn when we build decks, when we try decks out for the first time. This is where those are the cards you keep in the back of your head in your little considering board, and you go, hey, this is a card I need to push in. Ovika, it's a big creature, 7 mana for a 6/6, but whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make X goblin creature tokens with haste. Here we go. Here's another goblin payoff for us when we do that. We're playing Sauron because why not? Again, free amass on our opponent's turn when they cast spells is great. When an army deals combat damage to a player, the ring can tempt us. When the ring tempts us, we can pitch our hand if we do draw 4 cards. Sauron is a great commander in its own right. I've already done a video on that over the channel. You won't check that out. But I think it literally fits exactly what this deck's trying to do, so why not put it in? And then Zulaport. Zulaport's, of course, one of the most popular aristocrat payoffs in the game. Whenever it or another creature dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Well, here we go. This can pay off again that amass, but sacrifice it before the next amass trigger goes off kind of game plan like we did with Mirkwood Bats. We won't do as much damage with Mirkwood, but we'll gain some life out of the process, deal some damage. And I think it just it works out. Now, the great part about Zulaport Cutthroat and Mirkwood Bats is they say loses a life, not deals damage. What that does is that we'll get around fog effects if anyone plays one. But again, we're just trying, like the Goblin Bombardment, we're just trying to pay off a little bit of everything to see where the deck shines. I think what this deck will do for most people is you try it out, you realize which of these 3 game plans works the best, whether it's the token spam, whether it's the army spam, or whether it's the aristocrat spam, or any combination of those 3. You can even pick your favorite 2 and kind of just slightly veer the deck towards that. Personally, I would probably do the go wide tokens plus Aristocrats, I think the Amass is still going to be there, and it's still going to be the driver. But I think you might, pulling in something like a Bastion Remembrance, pulling in something like Veteran's, Agent of the Iron Throne, pulling and stuff like that could get you a little bit more of the damage if you like that aristocratic style. If you want to do that. Otherwise, again, I like this big mix because I think no matter what happens in the game, hopefully you're amassing, pun intended, enough value, to make the deck work. And then just one Planeswalker in Angrath, giving all of our creatures menace, and then we can amass 2 for -2, and that's great because then. We can amass if we need to, but also we're just giving our creatures flat menace. So what do you guys think? What do you think of Saruman? Again, I think it's interesting. I tried to kind of take the Sauron deck we talked about a few weeks ago and just shift it slightly into this more aristocratic game plan with some more spell slinging payoffs. Whereas again, Sauron wanted a different subset of them. But let me know what you think. Again, this is probably the version I'd be more intrigued to try because I love my spell slinging decks that make tokens and manipulate tokens. I just think it's really fun. It's a fun idea. So I'd love to see what you guys think of Saruman down in the comments. But other than that, that's what I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys next time.